Welcome to the Ultimate Gaming Realm, and this is your curator, Dixon, logging on. When it comes to taking a journey into the post-apocalyptic world of gaming, many people think about the most popular role-playing game series of all time, Fallout. Well, now I'm going to take you all back to where the sci-fi open-world post-apocalyptic RPG adventures begin. And this classic RPG was indeed a true inspiration to Fallout. And without this honorable gem, the possibility of the Fallout franchise wouldn't exist. Because this gem is indeed a spiritual predecessor to Fallout. And this true RPG classic from 1988 is Wasteland. Wasteland was developed by Interplay and published by Electronic Arts. The Wasteland project was in development for 5 years prior to its release. 5 years. That was about the time when the main creators and designers of Wasteland, Brian Fargo, founded Interplay. And Brian Fargo was also one of the main geniuses behind the first 2 Fallout games, which were also done by Interplay. Wasteland was released in 1988 for the Apple II, Commodore 64, and MS-DOS IBM home computers. The 2013 re-release digital version was published by inXile Entertainment, which was also founded by Brian Fargo, and that's the version I'm actually playing. The awesome PC cover art was designed by Barry E. Jackson. Wasteland is one of those early computer role-playing games that has a satisfying story and challenging gameplay. Now, what makes Wasteland a challenging RPG experience with a decent storyline? Well, you know how the early Ultima games that started out in the early 80s? Which the early games in those series has its limitations, but they still have its graphics. But unlike any of the Ultima games, Wasteland has everything in text. The only 2 things about the graphics in the Wasteland game is the gameplay and these unique portraits that they use frequently when you're encountering with people, creatures, or machines. Wasteland is a computer role-playing game that pretty much has most elements of tabletop RPG references surrounding the game. In Wasteland, you will most likely be reading the dialogue throughout the entire game, even in combat or when you're selecting your weapons, and you always have to make sure you have the right type of ammo for that weapon, or depending on what hostile or number of hostiles you're going against. And you also want to make sure your crew member is armed with the right type of weapon, and you will be in combat a lot. And to get any further in the game correctly, you must pay a lot of attention when reading the dialogue. And there's even more to that, like if you're on a real adventure, writing stuff down like clues or passwords. Plus, a Wasteland survival guide and a paragraph book is required to advance, which both books comes with a box PC game, and if you don't have either of those 2 books, then you're screwed. Unless if you're playing the 2013 version of Wasteland, which the paragraphs have audio narration in the 2013 version.
Doorway of this car, you're almost overcome by the strong odor of...
And the 2013 version also comes with the digital PDFs of both survival guide and paragraph book. And I use the PDF books on my tablet when playing Wasteland on my laptop. Now the 2013 version pretty much comes in handy. Another interesting thing they added in the 2013 version of Wasteland is the HD and smoothing for the portraits, and you have the option to have an HD smoothing turned on or off. And with these enhanced features looks pretty good. but there's no movement in the portraits when having those enhanced features on, so I decided to turn the enhanced features off when playing through the rest of the game. The 2013 version of Wasteland may be the easiest way of playing the game, but no matter what version of Wasteland you're playing, you're going to put a lot of hours into the game, because the game does have an unforgiving difficulty setting, and you will die quite a bit before you get the hang of it. I put out a lot of hours into Wasteland, and I don't have any regret doing it, especially with this atmospheric soundtrack that keeps me going. And these type of computer role-playing games can be an exercise to my mind, but it does get tiring after a while. The main characters of the Wasteland are called Desert Rangers, and the faction can be limited up to 4 Rangers. But you can recruit up to 3 non-playable characters, which leaves the exact limitation to 7 members in your party. And these extra non-playable characters can be helpful, but you don't always have much control with them like you do with your Rangers. Oh, and these main 4 default characters in party, Hellraiser, Angel of Death, Thrasher, and Snake Fargus, they're pretty good, but I would recommend you to delete those 4 characters and make your own party. Make sure each 4 Desert Ranger has the proper attributes and skill perks. The most important attributes I would recommend the most are Strength, IQ, Dexterity, and Luck. And you will have to roll until you get the correct number of attributes that's right for the character. Now the most important perks I would think is Perception, Medic, Picking Locks, Brawling, and Assault Rifle. And I definitely recommend that each of the 4 characters have different perks. Or should I say, it's probably not a good idea to have each of the 4 characters have the identical perks and attributes. But it's definitely a better idea to at least have 1 or 2 skill points each for the recommendable attributes and perks. You can upgrade your perks and attributes, like after the number of damage you do in combat and how many points you earn. You can radio in and see if you can get a promotion, which means upgrading your attributes or perks. If one of your Rangers die, you can always go to the Ranger headquarters and recruit a new Ranger. Or if you're at the Ranger headquarters, you can always delete a Ranger and recruit a new one. Oh, and it's always a good idea to have a woman or 2 on the team just in case, because in the Wasteland, anything can happen. The portraits in Wasteland are awesome to look at. When you're facing hostiles, you're going to witness imitating portraits like rabbit dogs, bunnies, which looks more like rats than they do bunnies. You're also going to be dealing with desert dwellers, desert lizards, outlaws, leather-clad bikers with chains, punks, rail raiders, wasteland warriors, splicer dicers, and so on. Wasteland game was given a PG-13 rating, which is the equivalent of a PC-13 rating which Wolfenstein 3D had, and the equivalent of the future ESRB T rating. It was given that rating due to having these phrases during combat after dealing with your rival. Phrases like reduce to a thin red paste and explode like a blood sausage. And I also think these villainous type of portraits can give kids nightmares. So it does make sense for this game to have a T rating. The story of the Wasteland game is set in 2087, generations after the devastation of a global nuclear war in 1998, 89 years earlier. Now there's been a number of strange happenings throughout the Wasteland, so this is where my party comes in. My party represents a distant remnant force of the United States Army called the Desert Rangers. And the Desert Rangers is based in the southwest of the United States. A team of Desert Rangers is assigned to investigate a series of disturbances in nearby areas. Throughout the game, The Rangers explore the remaining enclaves of human civilization, including a post-apocalyptic Las Vegas. As the Rangers' investigation deepens, the Rangers discover evidence of a larger menace threatening to exterminate what is left of humankind. A pre-war artificial intelligence computer operating from a surviving military facility, Base Cochise. Base Cochise is a base constructing armies of killing machines and cybernetically modified humans to attack settlements with the help of deranged former commander of the base, Erwin Finster. Finster has transformed himself into a cyborg under the AI's control. The AI's ultimate goal is to complete Project Darwin, which Finster was in charge of, and replace the world's flawed population with genetically pure specimens, with the help from a pre-war android named Max. Now the Desert Rangers must recover the necessary technology and weapons in order to confront the computer at the base and stop it by making the base nuclear reactor melt down. And to be honest with you, I'm yet far from completion, because it is a complex game. But the more you do in the Wasteland, the more interesting plot twists you discover. Wasteland was a groundbreaking experience that pioneered many other persistent world of post-apocalyptic RPG games for years to come. Wasteland may not be a game for everyone, since it's an older game, because it's all in text. And I couldn't blame them, because it's a hard game to get into, especially if you're more used to modern RPG games. Wasteland game was tough for me, but I got the game down since I started playing it. And I'm still trying to figure things out about the game, which is another way for me to say that I'm far from completion. Wasteland is a dated game, and it's far from being easy, but it was still fun going through a real challenge with this classic tabletop CRPG style, and eventually I'll give it another go at it. Wasteland also has a fantastic soundtrack and a great story, and I do hope I eventually come across a physical copy of the original box set of the Wasteland game, with all the booklets. That would make my gaming collection shelf look good, but chances are that probably won't happen, but who knows. But I would recommend the 2013 re-release digital version of Wasteland for $5.99. You can find the digital version either on goodoldgames.com or Steam for a cheaper and easier experience. They were going to do 2 attended sequels to Wasteland. First one was going to be Fountain of Dreams, but Electronic Arts decided to make the game as a different post-apocalyptic game instead. An Interplay team had nothing to do with Fountain of Dreams. I guess EA and Interplay must have split up at the time. Fountain of Dreams was the work of EA using a similar gameplay engine that Wasteland had. But from what I read, Fountain of Dreams wasn't good as Wasteland. I haven't played it, but it's now in my queue. And the second attended sequel was called Meantime, which Interplay was behind this time. But sadly, Meantime got cancelled for numerous reasons. So Fountain of Dreams was an attended sequel that became its own game, and Meantime was an attended sequel that was never made. Interplay and Brian Fargo brought a true spiritual successor to the Wasteland game 9 years later. And it's a game that will set the course for post-apocalyptic role-playing games forever. The 1997 game, Fallout. Fallout might have been a spiritual successor from the Wasteland game, done by Interplay, and it has a post-apocalyptic setting, but Fallout is most certainly not a sequel to Wasteland. The story and gameplay is totally different than Wasteland. Wasteland was a tabletop text RPG game. Fallout was a point-and-click turn-based RPG game. And role-playing games, especially the post-apocalyptic ones, came a long way since the Wasteland game. But we do have to give tons of credit towards the Wasteland game, no matter if it's the type of game for you or not, because without Wasteland, the Fallout franchise would most likely never exist, if it wasn't for Wasteland. In 2002, Wasteland creator and Interplay co-founder founded another video game developing studio, inXile Entertainment. And as I mentioned, the 2013 re-release digital version of Wasteland was published by inXile, and the re-release title is known as Wasteland 1, the original classic, meaning that the subtitle for the re-release is telling us that there's a sequel, Wasteland 2. A long-awaited sequel finally arrives after 25 years. Wasteland 2 was originally a successful Kickstarter project that began in February of 2012. Fargo brought the team from the original Wasteland game along with team members from the first Fallout game to work on Wasteland 2. And Fargo also brought the composer Mark Morgan to the team, the same composer that worked on the first two Fallout games. Wasteland 2 was released in 2014 for Windows and OS X. Wasteland 2 has a similar storyline to the first game, but the gameplay is a different story. In fact, Wasteland 2 is a spiritual successor to the first two Fallout games, because Wasteland 2 is a point-and-click turn-based and party-based role-playing game with tactical combat. It's really awesome that Brian Fargo brought the Wasteland series back to life with a long-awaited sequel 25 years later, and I would like to talk more about Wasteland 2, but I'll save it for its own video. Now there's even more good news in the Wasteland series. A third installment is now in the works, but I think I've gone on just about far enough, so it's time to call an episode. Please do like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. This is Dixon of the Ultimate Gaming Realm, logging off.